Hey now, and happy Thanksgiving. We are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. Dada, with episode 668 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Turkey Day, so you know exactly what that means. We are here to break down everything that happened over the last week across NXT and AEW. For AEW, they are coming out of full gear, beginning the build to World's End, a quick turnaround, 1 month to go to their final pay-per-view of the year. NXT is putting its finishing touches on the build for NXT Deadline, featuring those two Iron Survivor Challenge matches. Now, we are taping this show Thursday morning, even though many of you probably won't even hear it until Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe even early next week due to the holiday. But we wanted to make sure we got on top of this as soon as we possibly could, give you as much time as possible to listen. Because of that, there will be no ratings discussion on today's show, and we're going to move through this, as quickly as we possibly can. There's only 5 hours of television to cover on this episode, as opposed to the normal 7. That should help. And also, the Silver King kind of wants to watch some football. So let's go ahead and break down everything that happened across NXT and AEW. Of course, before we get to that, allow me to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
Head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we'll read it right here on the show. We already got a couple coming out of Tuesday's plea. So if you do it, we would love to knock all of those out on Tuesday's episode. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month, $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major TV show, and exclusive news analysis posts. You get all of that at buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. I would be remiss if I did not tell you to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast, and on Blue Sky at Getting Over for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. It is also where you can send in questions and comments for the show, and you can vote in polls around major events like WWE Survivor Series War Games, which, of course, is coming up this Saturday. Getting Over will be back with a Survivor Series War Games instant analysis podcast, and already in the feed is your WWE Survivor Series War Games Ultimate preview. So make sure you listen to that before Saturday's show if you have not already. Now, as usual, we are going to start with NXT. We will move to AEW in the second half of the show. There are timestamps in the episode description. If you need to jump around, if you want to jump around, get up and get down, whatever the case is. But those timestamps are there, so you can move if you want. But as always, we hope you listen to the entire show. So the Chase U entrance music opened NXT with Ridge Holland entering to twist the knife and gain heat, which was absolutely achieved. He basically came out and dropped the mic. Short, sweet, probably more effective than him cutting an entire promo, if we're being honest. Trick Williams came out later talking about NXT being chaotic of late, with the potential end of Chase U being a sad moment last week. His contention was that Ridge doesn't respect NXT and its history the way he does, and he even shouted out a bunch of NXT legends, including Carmelo Hayes, as part of that. Williams refused to let Holland become NXT champion, suggesting it would kill the brand. Ridge came out to answer when all of a sudden, Eric Bischoff, of all people, shows up on the Titantron. He said he's going to be at NXT next week to find out how bad they want the title, suggesting he would raise tensions between them by stirring the pot. Why? Why is this needed? Who is asking for this? It comes across as completely random and simply throwing a name on a show just to do it. But in 2024, does anyone give a shit about Eric Bischoff? I'm not a hater of his necessarily, but if he's going to be on TV, it needs to make sense and serve as a value add to the product. I don't see how that's the case here. They don't need someone to stir the pot in a feud when they already hate each other. And his name value is not going to increase ratings on the show. So what's the purpose here? This is going to be the lone singles match on Deadline. And so far, the build has mostly been about Chase U and now Bischoff. I was fine with the whole protecting NXT from Ridge part of this, what Trick said in his promo. That worked. But it was completely glossed over to get Eric on the show. Maybe it's all going to work out next week and my pessimism will be proven unnecessary, but I just don't see it. I don't get it. It was later announced that X-Pac, Sean Waltman, will also be on NXT next week. No word on what he will be doing or why he's going to be there. He's similarly not someone who is going to draw ratings, but at least he has the chance to do something interesting. And at least he's a talent, a competitor, potentially, as opposed to Bischoff, who's just going to, lead a back and forth interview segment? I mean, you could have The Miz come down and do that. You know what I mean? So let's move to the Iron Survivor qualifier matches. We had Axiom against Ethan Page. Axiom was all over Page throughout. He had a really nice running Spanish fly. Page came back with a nice backbreaker, but Axiom caught him on the top rope for an avalanche Spanish fly where Page rotated just a little late, which made me gasp, but it made the move even better. Page dropped Axiom across the top rope with another backbreaker, only to eat a terrific tornado DDT. Axiom tried for a backpack sleeper and a front chancery, only to take a backbreaker powerbomb. Page went for avalanche Ego's Edge, but got countered into a hurricanrana. He then immediately countered Golden Ratio with a huge lariat to get the win. This over-delivered to an extensive, almost surprising degree. Axiom really is incredible between the ropes, and Page was right there with him the entire match. He's just so solid and really a top-tier B-side. He's not going to carry a match, but he will make it exciting, and he can keep up with whomever he's competing against. He can meet them at their level, put on a show. 3.75 stars B+. I may actually be downplaying this a little bit, but 2 commercial breaks was rough. Page was the expected winner, as we discussed last week, but I was hoping Axiom would get in the match because it could have been a high-flying extravaganza to have him part of Iron Survivor. I'll also point out, across 2 different brands, so NXT and Dynamite, this was one of 3 matches that heels won this week with lariats. Now, in this match, I felt it made sense because of the way they were telling the story and how the match ended. It was a counter directly to a move, and Axiom still got over way strong because he got the vast majority of the offense. I didn't feel the same way necessarily about the lariats over in AEW. We'll talk about that later. I just wanted to kind of connect the two and let you all know I'm not viewing one brand from another in a silo. These all stood out to me as strange match enders in tournament qualifiers, by the way, equivalent type matches. Page cut a promo after the bell, first putting over Axiom before saying he's the last guy that people want in this match. Nathan Frazier interrupted, saying the match was his speed, so Page smartly wedge drove, getting Frazier to briefly suggest he's the leader of the tag team champions. Axiom, of course, took exception hearing that outside. Wes Lee butted in, and I guess he's going to be the tweener in this match, with fans chanting, "Who are you?" And you may say, why the hell did they chant, "Who are you?" It's because Wes cut off his braids and looked like a completely different person. It really felt like he lost some of his character there. Javon Evans was out next, saying the match was going to be valid when suddenly all the tag teams came out and brawled, so the champions took them out with topes. The brawl continued unabated more than 30 minutes later in the parking lot. Someone was thrown through a backseat car window. Someone else got smashed into the hood and windshield. I think WWE added some sweetener in post for that last one, but not that it matters that much. 2 weeks of the tag teams brawling was fine. 3, it's now starting to grow immensely stale. What exactly is Ava doing? Just sitting by as they run amok on this program. That was my thought here. Like a couple of weeks ago, she did the summit. But she did the summit and didn't have a decision. She's like, hey, we're all going to gather here and you're all going to get a chance to compete for the tag team titles, but I'm not going to tell you how. So why don't you just brawl with each other for 2 weeks while I still don't make a decision? It's really easy to make a decision. Tournament, gauntlet, battle royal. Like those are pretty much your options, or a series of matches. And at the end, I'll just pick a number 1 contender. Like, there's so many different opportunities to choose a number one contender. And it took her 2 weeks, really 3, if you want to talk about the number of shows that this transpired across, to make a decision ultimately, which did happen later in the program. My positive from this was, hey, at least the parking lot is getting some action again. You can't be the most dangerous place in professional wrestling and not have attacks and, attempted murders. And finally, they're getting back to that. The 4-way promo with the Iron Survivor contenders, I felt that was unnecessary when the 5th is undecided. It should have just been Paige and kind of Frazier going at it. And finally, man, look, I'm not one to tell people how they should dress or how they should do their hair or whatever the case is. I do question this decision by West to cut off his braids. He had such a unique, identifiable look, and that's really the key point, identifiable. And it was all gone in a flash. It didn't help that he was out there wearing like boring ass vacation wear clothes, like what Frank Costanza would bring on a cruise or something. And the whole presentation of West, it was like he went from this like kind of unique guy who's maybe, okay, he's not at the top of his game right now in terms of the way he's being booked, but he's still believable to become a number one contender. And then you turn around and he's like a generic wrestler. And I just don't understand like why they did that or why he decided to do that. Again, I'm all for like changing up your look, and I'm not trying to tell people how to dress or how to do their hair or anything like that. But what I would have suggested is if you're going to cut off all your braids and stuff, do something else that's identifiable and different, right? Like little twists or something like that. I don't know. Like it's not my type of hair, so I can't really speak to it. But do something that sets you apart, or dress in a way that sets you apart. Do something. He just kind of looked like a creator wrestler out there, and that's not what we have come to expect when seeing this guy, right, for the last 4-ish years, as long as he's been in WWE. Ava later addressed the tag team situation with Fraxium. She decided there would be a tag team battle royal with the titles being defended at Deadline, which was patently unfair to Frazier and potentially Axiom as well if he ends up getting in that match. There was a third brawl with all the teams as Josh Briggs and Yoshiki Inamura pulled the champions away to talk to them about something. We still don't know what that is. I just think this is terrible general managering, both in kayfabe and even in reality to a degree. NXT has such a large roster. Why would you make 1 or 2 guys work twice, particularly given the 2 matches is on a signature show? One of them is a signature match on that show, and it is a high-intensity match. I mean, just Frazier alone. Axiom's not in the match. I have a feeling he might be, right? It would make booking sense and based on what they were telling us Tuesday. But even just for Frazier, to have him go all out in a tag team title match, let's say 14 minutes, and then go into an Iron Survivor that I believe is 25 or 30, and he really needs to go all out there because that's the signature match. That's the key match. I'm talking about reality, not cave. That's a lot to ask of someone. I don't care that he's young. I don't care that he's thin and fast and has high endurance, all that shit. That's, when people wrestle 40 minutes, there's a reason why when there are 40-minute matches or Iron Man matches that there's slowdown parts and cool down parts. It's because you can't ask someone to go that high intensity for that period of time and have them not get hurt, right? You're trying to protect the talent as well. So I just don't understand why this is the decision. Now, maybe it's going to work itself out in the creative, and that's what we can kind of talk about in a moment. But just from a booking concept standpoint, I'd much rather this whole tag team thing be something that transpires on TV, and then you have them in the match, and that potentially plays into their storyline. Now, I would presume, right, these matches will be separate on the show. And there are only really 2 ways to do that. One of them needs to open, is without a question. You could start with the tag team title match. They successfully defend the titles. Then they go into the Iron Survivor. And because they need to start fighting each other there, it splits them. You can do the exact same thing, except they lose the titles in the opener for one reason or another, because they're concentrated on Iron Survivor, or they just lose straight up. And then that adds tension between them, which comes to a head in the Iron Survivor. Frazier turns heel, and they actually continue feuding afterward, which I don't necessarily know that I want, right? Because they work extremely well together. There's not a great reason to split them up unless Frazier, I would assume, right, would be the one maybe getting pushed to the North American title or potentially even the NXT championship down the line at some point. But again, you don't need to break them up now if you're going to do that. The other way, of course, is you do the men's Iron Survivor first. That opens the show. They build some animosity between each other, further animosity between each other, because they do need to go after each other in that match. And then that leads to them losing the titles later in the show when they're not only exhausted, but at odds already. The issue with all of these bookings, and this is something that we've talked about previously, is all of the contenders in this match are pretty much unworthy. I mean, you could say Gallus would be worthy of winning the titles back. They're super talented, even if their gimmick hasn't necessarily hit. Although recently the comedy stuff they have been doing has been better. But the vast majority of teams in this match are nowhere near ready for prime time. They should not be champions, especially over a team like Fraxium, which have been incredible tag team champions, the best tag team champions, I was going to say in WWE, but the best tag team champions in WWE, AEW, or TNA right now. Probably Ring of Honor too, except I don't watch that. They are the most exciting team, probably in American professional wrestling right now. And they've had a great title run. It does not need to end, especially to lacking contenders. So that's my frustration. We'll see how it plays out. With NXT, you can get frustrated and angry and you can say this or that. And then at the end you go, oh yeah, that made sense. And I'm glad they did it that way, or at least I understand why they did it that way. But this is how I feel coming into it. And really one positive, if Men's Iron Survivor does open the show, is that creates an opportunity for Women's Iron Survivor to close the show like it should. I do not want Trick Williams and Ridge Holland main eventing Deadline. They should be the mid-show match, maybe the co-main event. The main event should belong to the women, and here is why. Let's go to those qualifiers for the Women's Iron Survivor. Julia fought Kalani Jordan. Julia had blonde hair for this match. I was worried when she came over from Japan, they would force her to keep a same or similar hairstyle each week, given all of WWE's promotional reasons, mapping for the video game and all that type of stuff. Apparently, she's not being hindered in that way. Her unique hairstyles have always been part of her eye-catching presentation in Japan. I especially loved when she had those platinum braids. They haven't done that yet in WWE, but that's her best look as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, they shook hands after an extended start of counters. Julia prevented one of a kind, but Jordan came back with a catapult tornado, the exact kind of moves she should be doing, plausible and effective. Lonnie also had a nice running uppercut and a shotgun dropkick. Then she sidestepped a Julia missile dropkick, but Julia caught one of a kind with a triangle choke. She rolled Lonnie over in the middle of the ring, only for Lonnie to deadlift her for a Liger bomb. Julia came back with her glorious driver, a finisher unnamed by commentary again, even though it actually has a name. But Jordan immediately flipped over for a near fall, so Julia drove a knee and hit her Northern Lights bomb for the win. I would have loved a submission on the triangle choke spot or a pinfall on the glorious driver. It felt like Lonnie got way too protected here, which was totally unnecessary and is seemingly always the case with her. How about just letting Lonnie lose to one of the best women's wrestlers in the world in normal fashion? Like, is that so hard? The way NXT books her is strange. It's like she's a 10-year veteran who, when she loses a match, it's like the world is ending. That said, this was Lonnie's best match in ages, which is no surprise given she was working with Julia, who I'm sure had her cut out all the bullshit that she normally does. You guys remember how critical I was of Lonnie's last match, where she was doing flips and cartwheels and all this shit that meant absolutely nothing and it wasn't executed well. She did Rolling Thunder with a shooting star press that didn't make a shred of sense. There was none of that. The catapult tornado was the most athletic Lonnie-like thing she did, and it was a perfect move, the exact type of move that she should be doing. So comparing those two matches night and day, here, everything was substantive and valuable. It was not unnecessary flash that accomplished nothing. Julia was the obvious and correct winner, so they ultimately did decide to load up this Women's Iron Survivor. Slight surprise, just given that doesn't leave Roxanne Perez with an opponent for Deadline, so she will not be defending the title on that show. I would not be surprised to see Lani earn her way in as the last chance qualifier. We'll talk about that in a moment. But this match was terrific. 3.75 stars, B+. Again, I might be underselling this a little bit. These two absolutely rocked. I don't know between this and Paige and Axiom which was match of the night, and that's saying something, right? Because both were extremely good, totally worth watching. Speaking of that last chance qualifier, Ava backstage told all the losers from the qualifiers that there would be those matches next week. So it's going to be Axiom, Lexis King, Cedric Alexander, and Eddie Thorpe for the men, and then Jada Parker, Cora Jade, Kalani Jordan, and Ren Sinclair for the women. Both should be a bunch of fun. My wants, right, if I was booking, would be Alexander and Parker. My expectations are Axiom and I guess Lani. Cora's an option. Jada's probably going to get taken out by Lola Vice. Lexis, he can lose. That would be totally fine with his character. Eddie would be a rough choice given the way the rest of the men's match has been built. Plus, if he's going to be, backstage moping around and angry, which he was again this week, then he can't exactly win and get into the qualifier. That wouldn't be the right move unless I guess he got in the qualifier and then got screwed out of winning it. But that's almost a step too far for me. Alexander, I would love for him to be in the match. I just don't believe they see him that way, but I think he would be incredible with the people that are already in it and deserving as a veteran and someone that would be beneficial for all the other guys in the match. Although Paige is there, so I guess maybe Cedric isn't needed that much. In terms of the women, just a little bit of additional analysis. Lani, she's the one they push, and that's pretty much why I'm going with her. I already told you Jada's probably going to get taken out by Lola. Cora could get in, and they probably do need another heel in that match, so I wouldn't write her off. Ren, it would be great if she was in that match, but I don't think she's, even in the upper mid-card right now, they still see her as a lower mid-carder, so they probably need to cycle out some women before she gets really pushed. Although it's been great that she's getting a lot more TV time recently. So Thorpe, again, complained backstage that it was unfair he had to be part of this match given he didn't lose his match clean. He went so far as to grab Ava's arm as she was walking through a door trying to go do something else. This happened as the tag team brawl was ongoing backstage. Ava screamed at him to never touch her when one of the other guys inadvertently bumped the door that she was standing behind. That sent her flying backwards. So after commercial, Shawn Michaels and trainers were checking on her. Ava began explaining how this all transpired. She said she was speaking to Thorpe when it happened, and that just sent HBK off to the point he got up, shoved Thorpe against a garage, jacked him up against it, in fact, and yelled at him. He could never touch her, all that type of shit, even though the guy really did nothing wrong. And I'm sitting there like, yo, this came out of nowhere. I've been feeling Thorpe's frustration leading to a logical heel turn, but HBK snapping at him like this was totally out of pocket. And credit to Ava for taking that bump like a champ. That door legit slammed into her and she went flying backwards. We spoke a few weeks ago about Thorpe's start and stop booking, his tough to buy gimmicks, his uneventful short matches. Well, they fixed the match problem a couple weeks ago, and they've been repairing the character slowly for the last month. Leave it to NXT to, turn chicken shit into chicken salad at every turn. This is a paradigm of why the show is such quality each week, because when we sit here and we spend a month or 2 months, you can call it complaining, criticizing, whatever the case, something on the show, then you turn around and they're like, yeah, you know what? This hasn't been that good. Let's go ahead and fix it, right? And they figured that out with Thorpe. So I'm extremely interested in his character. What's going to happen when he snaps? Is he going to go heel? When he does go heel, will he have a different presentation and a gimmick? Like, what are they going to do with this guy? Because you can't do what he normally does for his gimmick and be a heel, I wouldn't guess, right? And the DJ shit they tried to shove in there didn't work. So it looks like that's gone. That's all massive positives. Also, I should mention during the trick segment we broke down earlier, Williams made a fun comment about Ava being fine because we all know about her bloodline and how they take care of business. So I thought it was just pretty funny that they mentioned that on the show. Lola Vice and Stephanie Vaquer spoke in Spanish backstage, with Vice saying she's not done with Jada Parker and only intended to make sure Vaquer won the match. She seemed okay with that, Steph did. Ren butted in to their business, saying Lola should have just taken the L after getting a brick to the face. Obviously, she took exception to that, and it led to a match between them. Ren is hysterical, and great character work from her once again here. So we had Vice and Sinclair. This was surprisingly hard-hitting from Ren's standpoint. Sinclair was unwilling to stomp Vice's hand on the steel steps, but did successfully dropkick her into them. She soon got caught with a spinning back fist for the Lola win. Vice then yelled into the camera that she wasn't done with Parker and they would soon go underground. Hell yeah. Smart way to run it back between them. The match type that Lola has made her own. All of that makes sense together. I could see them going 1-1 with a rubber match or perhaps even a partnership coming out of it. Maybe a brief tag team title challenge. Sinclair is doing well in her role as a pin eater to the stars right now in NXT. I do hope she gets brought up a rung once there are more superstars shifted to the main roster, presumably around WrestleMania. That would be nice to see. Andre Chase was depressed, packing up his Chasey regalia while recounting the positive and negative headlines that the university made during his tenure. He stared longingly at his nameplate before being stopped by someone who called his name, though we could not see them. So it looks like the door might be open to continuing Chase U with new students. It's interesting, though, because the stipulation, as we discussed last week and as was clarified on the show, is that he just could not associate with Thea Hale, Duke Hudson, and Riley Osborne anymore. So it seemed like that possibility did exist. But in those classroom segments, there were way more students than just those three. So he could have, in theory, continued with all the others unless they were paying, let's say, the lion's share of the tuition or something like that to keep the class going. So, you know, it's a little uneven from a logic standpoint, but we'll see who called out his name and we'll see what's going to happen with that. It was an American accent, so it certainly wasn't Hudson, and I presume, of course, it wasn't Osborne, so we'll find out what's going to happen, I guess, next week. Tatum Paxley was talking to her dolls backstage when Fatal Influence came in to bully her, throw her doll, and call her a freak. Paxley responded after they left, "Your past will haunt you." Then we saw like an idle hand enter the frame and pick up one of the dolls off the ground, and it was a red-headed doll. This was most certainly Gigi Dolan, who returned to the NXT house show loop last week after being cleared for action. Gigi going up against Influence, given it's helmed by JC Jane, makes a lot of sense. In fact, Dolan teaming with Paxley makes sense as well. They fit real nicely together. We will see if that happens. The Women's North American Championship was on the line. You'll remember this was an open challenge last week. Fallon Henley defending against Paxley. This main evented the show. Paxley impressed early, but again got bullied and outnumbered ringside, allowing Henley to hit her with like a 619 style kick to the head around the ring post. They later collided on a simultaneous crossbody. Tatum hit a running crossbody in the corner and a torture rack drop. That looked really cool. JC distracted on the ropes as Tatum went high risk. That allowed Fallon to catch her with a pump handle overhead slam. Another really cool move. Paxley landed a 450 for a false finish. Effortless 450 from Tatum. Crazy. But Henley countered the Psycho Trap, an actual named finisher. Holy shit. Paxley took out Jane as she attempted a rolling forearm. She went for the Psycho Trap again, but Henley grabbed the bottom rope to stop her and hit a famouser to retain the title. The expected result, but it didn't hurt any less seeing Tatum lose. This was an excellent main event between two of the most unsung women in NXT. Fallon is now finally getting her shine, but Tatum remains immensely underrated. Hopefully, this is the start of bigger and more consistent pushes for her. You cannot watch her wrestle and do character work and cut promos and come to any other conclusion than that she needs to be featured more regularly. Another match in the B-ish range, I'll say 3.5 stars, flat B. Would have loved to see this without interference. I think it might have been able to get to a higher level potentially, but it was super entertaining. I still do not understand why Henley has gone away from the Shining Wizard, going with the Famouser now as a finisher. It's a far worse move. It's not particularly unique to her. It's unnamed, so they haven't made it a signature or anything like that. NXT in some respects, has a finisher problem. There are some superstars who have great finishers, right? I know there's probably an argument over Hypnotic for Jada Parker. It makes plenty of sense, and I love the name. Again, a named finisher. They're saying this is something that she is owning, right? And she's going to do it her way. One of a kind for Lonnie, a great finisher. Glorious Driver for Julia, named great finisher. And then there's a swath of women. Another great example, by the way, Soul Snatcher. And there's a swath of women and men, too. There's a ton of men who just do finishing moves, but they don't have names and they're not sold as finishers, and it's immensely frustrating. So Henley, someone who was ready to get called up to the main roster last year, changing her finisher to a worse one that doesn't have a signature, it's just frustrating for me. Influence attacked Paxley after the bell, only for Dolan to indeed make her return through the crowd for a sneak attack. She leveled Jane in particular and then lifted up Paxley so they could hit stereo. And I mean stereo. It was like a video game enziguris to end the show. They could have done that spot 100 times and not executed it more fluidly than that. Speaking of, Gigi looked completely refreshed in the ring. It was only 1 minute of work, but she had been quite plodding and slow of late. It appeared as if she has improved markedly. So I don't know what she was doing, if she got treatment or she stretched or whatever the case while she had her time off, but she looked reborn as a wrestler in this 60 seconds. We'll see, of course, when she gets into a full match. Men's North American Championship was on the line, and it being this low in our breakdown tells you what the storyline is doing right now. Tony D'Angelo against Shawn Spears. Brooks Jensen told Spears backstage that he was brilliant for the way he manipulated Tony D into this match. Spears largely dominated, taking advantage of D'Angelo's injured knee until Tony hit a superplex. Spears caught him with a pump knee and put in a figure four, leading to a rope break. After going back to the knee, D'Angelo was unable to hit his spinebuster. However, he caught Spears off a counter and then hit the spinebuster as part of that to retain the title. Jensen and ultimately Nico Vance attacked after the bell, with the latter laying out D'Angelo. For some reason, the male family members weren't out there to help or anything. Since when is D'Angelo doing anything and the family is not close behind? Like, what sense? The guy's getting attacked 3-on-1 and no one can come out to help him. I understand they were part of the tag team brawl. I believe it was over at this juncture. I might be wrong about that, but I believe the tag team brawl was already over. Or, someone, hey, Tony's getting attacked. They come out and they're all injured and broken and beaten themselves, and they at least check on him afterward. You do something, right? But instead it was nothing. The family is only as interesting as its opposition, generally. So this is largely boring the hell out of me. That's not to say it's bad by any means. I just don't care one iota about Spears, Jensen, or Vance. And nothing has been done to make me care about them. The match was relatively unremarkable. Like, I don't grade every TV match, but if I did, it would be in the C range, right? Like, it was just nothing. I'm ready for D'Angelo to move on to someone more interesting and entertaining. It was really frustrating that they have gone to this feud as the first one, coming out of this guy toppling Oba Femi. And now you're going into Shawn Spears and Brooks Jensen and a brand new superstar, for the most part, someone coming up from the PC. Really frustrating. Nikita Lyons told Ashanti the Adonis backstage that she stepped in last week to try to get his attention. Adonis said he's got something with Carmen Petrovic, who is different, so he wasn't really interested anymore. Lyons got him to admit that he did text her at least once when Petrovic walked in the room at that exact time, so she overheard it. Carmen obviously snapped, hearing that, as Nikita kind of teased her on the way out. Definitely better than last week, the high teen drama shit that we're talking about. But as I tweeted, and I completely maintain it and stand by this comment, could you imagine fumbling Carmen Petrovic for Nikita Lyons? Couldn't be me.
I don't like that.
I don't like that at all. That wraps up NXT, a super fun 2 hours, as is normally the case. I hate stressing to people that they should watch this show because it comes across as biased when it's not. It's just what I am enjoying the most on, my sojourn of watching professional wrestling over an entire week. I mean, it's 4 hours of main roster, 2 hours of NXT, that's 6. And then we normally get 5 hours of AEW, so 11 hours of wrestling, plus pay-per-views and premium live events. And NXT is by far the easiest. I'm not saying it's the best necessarily. It is the easiest 2 hours to watch, and it's probably the most fun 2 hours to watch. And this was another example of that. A really solid episode. The Iron Survivor qualifiers particularly were great. Those set up some real interesting matches. And now we have the go home to NXT deadline next week, which snuck up on me. For some reason, I thought it was the middle of December, but that's the Saturday night's main event date. So they're actually doing it next week. That's going to be a go home show in this spot. Of course, the ultimate preview for NXT deadline. And then we will have your NXT deadline instant analysis next weekend after that show goes off the air. So let's move to AEW, and we do have a news item to tackle off the top of this show. And this is the ongoing frustrating situation with Ricky Starks. Now, Starks appeared on a podcast this week, did an interview. He's also made a couple appearances, or maybe it was just one appearance, at GCW. And they're currently, GCW is running an angle where it's kind of like anti-AEW, even though I don't believe AEW is totally in on it, even if they're okay with it, because they are giving them talent, both for that show and for Josh Barnett's Bloodsport, which, by the way, Carmen Petrovic wrestled on this past week, as I believe did Marina Shafir, and Jon Moxley showed up with her. So just some cool stuff all there, but that's really besides the point that I'm trying to make here. So, Starks has been out of action for a while at this juncture. And over on buymeacoffee.com/gettingover, we reported a couple months ago, I believe, that the expectation was Starks' contract was going to end in the summer or fall. And at that point, he would become a free agent and presumably go over to WWE. That's what we were told, and that's all we knew. Well, Fightful reported this week that AEW picked up Starks' option for a year this past spring. And we did not know that there was an option on his contract, which is probably why so many people thought and told us that his contract was coming due. Well, apparently, the way this story goes is that Starks asked Tony Khan not to pick up his option because they weren't using him, and he kind of wanted to go do his own thing and figure stuff out for himself, whether he wanted to come back or go somewhere else, if Tony would even use him, right, if he remained there. And they just picked up the option anyway, and are still not using him. And he's sitting there doing nothing. Furthermore, he decided, okay, I'm going to start doing some independent wrestling dates since AEW is not using me. And AEW cleared him to work with GCW. Apparently, someone associated with GCW said some not so nice things about either Tony Khan or Shad Khan or AEW, whatever the case might be, but like out of kayfabe, like in an interview or something like that. And therefore, they have now pulled Starks from GCW. So he can work other independents, but he can't work GCW, which was the one independent that it seems like he was excited to work while he waited for his contract to expire. Now, outside of that part, which of course is vastly different from WWE historically, although these days talent is allowed to work independents, select situations approved by the company. But look, folks, this is super hypocritical, right? By AEW and Khan, keeping someone under contract who doesn't want to be there, who says they want to leave. Now, all reports are, and my understanding as well, is that Starks has not directly asked for his release. And that's fine. I wouldn't ask for my release either, because what I would prefer is to be paid hundreds of thousands of dollars while not working and potentially not getting injured. And going and doing independent shows if I want, and if I do get injured, I'm still being paid. So I wouldn't ask for my release either if I was in his situation. But if this is all true, and he did ask them not to pick up his option, and they did it anyway, even though they were keeping him off TV and not using him, I mean, that's immensely hypocritical from the stance that AEW and Khan took when this company began. It was, if you don't want to be here, we're not going to keep you here. Now, things have happened since then that have kind of understandably changed their perspective to a degree. Obviously, CM Punk's exit, right, and joining WWE and becoming super over and making them a ton of money, that doesn't totally fall into this. I would say the best example maybe is the exit of Jade Cargill, who just decided not to renew, I guess, late in the process, immediately went over to WWE. They announced it, made a huge deal out of it, got some headlines, so on and so forth. And it's understandable, between those two things happening and other AEW stars going over to WWE, and I don't want to say striking it big, but making impacts, Ethan Page and Lexis King to a lesser degree, but even to a little degree. I understand AEW being more hesitant to just let talent out of their contracts, right? But agreements can be made. Hey, you don't want to be here anymore. Okay, we're not going to pick up your option. Okay, you don't want us to pick up your option. That's fine. Let's do an amendment where we won't pick up your option, but for 90 days, you can't work for WWE. Just to, make it an even greater buffer between when you're on our TV and when you're on their TV, or when the news of your contract ending happens and when you show up on their screen. There are things that you can do. Lawyers get involved, contract attorneys. Like, you can make it work so that you're not hurting the careers of your talent who perhaps no longer want to be part of your company, where at the same time, you're protecting yourself to a degree. Let's not forget, this is happening simultaneously with Rey Fenix, who's being kept off TV, not being used, because it's pretty much a bad secret that he and his brother, Pentagon, are presumably going to go over to WWE when their contracts expire. It's believed Pentagon's contract has expired. So these guys aren't being used. Starks isn't being used. And they're just sitting around doing nothing, which, again, wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world, because that's what happened historically in WWE. You'll remember the Free Ali movement, right? And some other people who asked for their release but were kept. Even grizzled young veterans, right, asked for their release but were kept for, I think, like 6 months. But the difference is they were utilized every week almost on television. They put people over, they lost, they left. They got rid of the faction. They did all that shit. These guys are just sitting home doing nothing, which is exactly what Vince McMahon did to talent forever, and was one of those supposed differentiators for AEW. We're not going to be like WWE. We're going to be much more friendly to talent. We're not going to keep them captive and handcuffed and all these things, right? All those key terms that got the fans so excited when AEW started. So, look, I'm not here to heavily criticize, Tony Khan over this. It is understandable to a degree why he has changed his stance. That said, if you're going to pick up someone's option and then still not use them, that is absolutely hypocritical. And it is counter to a lot of what was said about your company, both by yourself and by people within, for years, ever since its existence. So it's not a good look. They're getting rightly criticized for it. And I really hope that, like Starks, I hate to use the term because it's so ridiculous when you're getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I hope he gets his freedom, right? I hope he gets the opportunity to go do what he wants in his career. This guy is, I don't want to say he's old because he's younger than me, but he's not young, right? I think he's 35 and time is ticking away. So you're going to take another year off this guy's career and make him sit at home just because you don't want him showing up in WWE. He's probably going to start in NXT. Not that he couldn't start on the main roster. Starks is able and capable to start on the main roster, but it's probable that he would start in NXT for 6 months, get a quick run, do a Dragon Lee, then go out and go to the main roster. So, what are you preventing, really? You're not really preventing anything. You're just kind of making your talent look at you different, and you're getting talent over in WWE saying, see, look what they're doing over there. We actually release people when they ask for it now, or we at least use them still, even when we know they're leaving. Ricochet being a good example of that. So, yeah, just a frustration off the top. It's a news story going around. I thought it was worth mentioning. Also, newsworthy, AEW predictably moved its Grand Slam Australia event from a stadium to an arena that seats 13,500 fans. Now, that's likely going to sell out. Let's be very clear. And that's a positive. 13,500 tickets will probably be the most arena tickets that they've sold, I would guess, in a couple years, because they've done stadiums well, but I don't think arenas have really done more than 10 or 11,000. Those are usually capacity for the arenas they run. So that venue is likely going to sell out. But look, from the moment this was announced, it was obvious that a venue change was likely. We stated firmly that would be the case on this podcast. That's not a shot against AEW. Booking an Australian stadium was crazy ambitious, particularly doing it outside of Sydney or Melbourne. Even though those locations would not have sold through, they probably would have sold better, and maybe they could have kept it in the stadium with a smaller setup. I don't know. But unlike in Europe, where AEW content is relatively easy to access, that is not the case down under. And trying to plant a flag there just because WWE did, with Elimination Chamber last year, it was so obviously motivated and the outcome was predictable. I said last year, and I'm saying it again this year because rumors are that WWE is going to go back to Perth. I don't understand why they're ignoring the east coast of Australia, which is where the vast majority of the population resides. Now, it seems like it's because Perth is just paying them a sick number to go over there in terms of a rights fee. And I guess Sydney and Melbourne and anywhere else won't do that or won't go to that high number, right? But they are still going over there twice in as many years, WWE, it seems, and ignoring the most populous part of the country, which just doesn't make sense. It would be like running a major show in New York, but doing it 2 years in a row in Buffalo as opposed to New York City or Brooklyn, right? So I don't totally understand what WWE is doing. But anyway, Grand Slam is moving. It'll sell well. It'll probably sell out that venue. That's a huge positive. I think the atmosphere is going to be absolutely incredible. I just, again, at the original decision-making of going with that stadium, it was obvious that it was going to fall short. In terms of AEW Full Gear second look, I don't really have much to say. I did rewatch parts of the show, including those two key matches, Ospreay and Fletcher. I did settle at 4.5, Monet and Stat. I did settle at 4.25, both great matches. I just didn't think they were A+. I didn't think Ospreay Fletcher was A+ worthy, and I didn't think Monet's Stat got to that next level for the high A. Not that it really matters. Okay, for AEW, in terms of match relevancy this week, with the start of the Continental Classic, most of the matches on TV over the next few weeks will obviously come through round robin play. So these have relevance without further analysis needed. What we'll do instead is explore the relevance of non-Continental Classic matches. And this week, with Collision, mind you, not being held, every single match on Dynamite was part of a tournament, and every single match on Rampage was not storyline relevant. So they went 0 for 3 in that respect, but they hit 1,000 on Dynamite, even though, again, they're just randomly put together matches that happen to be part of a tournament. So we're going to throw this week out. There's no percentage, there's no whatever. And we will have to evaluate based on the way the shows are booked going forward, whether this is a stat category that we keep looking in through the duration of the Continental Classic. We may just need to come back to it after the fact. The long and short of it when it came to Dynamite on Wednesday is that, for me at least, the show just lacked AEW champion on screen for literally 30 seconds. No women's champion, no new TNT champion, no Will Ospreay. Swerve Strickland was only backstage for 60 seconds. Why are you making them fly over right before Thanksgiving to literally do nothing? It's possible the Swerve segment was taped. The show featured 4 tournament matches and a predictable title match. Some of the booking decisions were immensely curious, and that's probably being nice. Overall, you can just feel that AEW is in a huge creative lull while watching the product. Nothing really draws huge reactions. At least nothing did Wednesday. What used to be a rabid Chicago crowd was tiny, 4,000 fans, rather quiet except for big spots. And they did pop at times during the show. When they were loud, they were loud. But there was a lot of quiet in between. I would say it was a frustrating watch. And it's just kind of tough to see AEW on this trajectory right now. Dynamite started with a quick clip from Darby Allin after Full Gear went off the air. Blood was streaming down his face. He said Jon Moxley won't be able to kill AEW when he's already dead. Why they didn't end the show with this, I will never understand. It was way more impactful than Darby just standing there screaming and wilding out at the end. Also, moving directly from that into the Continental Classic, a tournament in which Darby is taking part, was kind of nonsensical to me. AEW is under attack from forces that want to tear it apart from the inside out. But let's just go on with a wrestling tournament that involves some of those same folks competing for a title that doesn't really give them any power. You know what I mean? So on Dynamite, Hangman Page cut off an interview question about Full Gear, immediately screaming that he'll knock out Christopher Daniels again if he gets in his face. Page said he kept up his end of the deal with Christian Cage, but since Christian did not, Hangman is unable to bring the AEW title home for Thanksgiving. I gotta pause here. How did that make a shred of sense? If Christian kept up his end of the deal, then he would have cashed in and beaten Jon Moxley for the AEW title. But then how would Hangman have it for Thanksgiving? Is he presuming Christian, a heel, would have defended the title immediately on Dynamite and that he would have won? Of course he wouldn't have defended it right away. It would made an already convoluted story even more convoluted by talking about having it at Thanksgiving. He should have said, hey, I repaid him the favor. He was supposed to give me a title match. He ruined it. That's it. I digress. Hangman made clear his intention has always been to regain the AEW title. Jay White interrupted, reminding he's 5-0 against Page. and saying he'll be the next champion. He offered a 6th match really out of nowhere, only for Pac to attack him from behind with Wheeler Yuta taking out Hangman's already injured knee. Death Riders immediately got taken out by White. Hangman then clotheslined White. Marina Shafir then cracked the briefcase over Hangman's head. She took out Hangman. White missed a shot himself and put her in Blade Runner, but he just held it for like 20 seconds, waiting until Mox could get in the ring and choke him out briefly. Then Shafir kicked him down low, maybe it was a low blow, and choked him out. Marina Shafir choking out Jay White. Total silence as this happens. Imagine telling White when he signed with AEW that the former IWGP heavyweight champion would be getting choked out by Shafir. So the crowd did boo after this was over when they attacked White 4-on-1. Pac then cracked the briefcase over White's head. Let's start with the Death Riders shit and then circle back to the rest. Why did only 2 of them come out at first? Claudio Castagnoli literally entered right after this was over because he had a match. Why was Shafir there fighting with Mox delayed when they're always coming out together? Why is Shafir the one taking out Hangman completely and getting White's final breath? And most importantly, where the fuck was everyone else? Not saving Hangman makes sense. He's not a babyface. But White, he's a babyface now. And he's the leader of a damn faction. None of Bang Bang Gang were there when they're always all together. Where was Willow Nightingale, who finally went after Shafir on Saturday? Where was the conglomeration that's been fighting them? I know Orange lost. The rest of them are still alive. I feel like I'm straight up losing my mind with the booking of this shit. Back to Hangman and White. It was a bunch of whatever. A 6th match offer straight away was kind of an eye roll. It feels like they might do a can they coexist tag team to get revenge on the Death Riders. That would be more fun than seeing them fight again, especially since AEW rarely does that kind of match. I presume if they do that, they'll just begin fighting each other after or during the match and end up continuing their feud. So I'm just kind of at a loss for this entire segment, just like I was after Full Gear. But again, if they team up, that would be interesting to me. MVP and the Hurt Syndicate were the first segment on Dynamite, with MVP repeating that his business card is a golden ticket. And then he pulled a WWE move and pointed to the big screen for a recap of the Bobby Lashley Swerve Strickland match. The audio, of course, was messed up on the video. MVP said they would take championships and leverage them for money and power. Then he did a bunch of alliteration, just multiple catchphrases, of which who knows how many of them they will use going forward. This is a frustratingly empty segment. MVP's passion, energy, and promo ability shone through like always. But from a content standpoint, it was just like, okay, and what? Despite that, the MVP positivity of the entire deal, this would get like a bad on our Tuesday show just for being a bunch of nothing. Reminder that Lashley has still done absolutely zero since joining AEW from a character and promo standpoint. It has been a total waste of his debut. Look at the way they treated Ricochet and look at the way they treated Lashley. Ricochet came in, he was cutting promos, having matches, doing all this stuff. Lashley, they gave away his first match in a squash with Cheeseburger. He had a really good match with Swerve, but in the month he's been on this product, he said like 6 words and none of them told us anything about him or his individual motivations or why he's there or anything. They're just letting MVP speak. And again, MVP is the most exciting part of Hurt Syndicate, but Lashley is the kingpin of the entire deal. And instead, he's looking like just another dude. Like it's him and Shelton Benjamin. And they're both pretty much the same. And that is not the way Lashley should be presented. Swerve backstage with Prince Nana said he'll figure out how to rebuild from the loss, but he's never been hit as hard as Lashley hit him. Max Caster strolled by talking shit under his breath, so Swerve called him out. Caster tried to act like he was coming up with bars, only for Swerve to jack him up against a wall, throw him into a road case, and kick him. It would take caring about Caster for this segment to register, and I just don't care about Caster. But beyond that, there was like zero heat, less than zero heat for the confrontation. This was like a great value version of the Cody Rhodes, Carmelo Hayes segment from last Friday. Same idea, mind-numbing execution. Swerve, I presume, will fight Caster, who will join Hurt Syndicate, and leave Anthony Bowens breaking up the Acclaimed, and then Bowens will feud with Caster for a little bit, and Caster will win that feud, and I don't know. That's my expectation of where all this goes. Maybe I'm wrong. the Continental Classic. Let's get to all of those matches. AEW made a format change this year, and it was music to my ears. I'm sure those of you who have listened to me talk wrestling know exactly why. Not only will the finals of the tournament be held at World's End, both semifinals will also be held on the pay-per-view. I absolutely love that. Basically, old school King of the Ring treatment. It creates so much more intrigue and storyline possibilities, especially if someone enters already injured, for example. One of AEW's best adjustments to something in a long time. The other part of this that changed is those semifinals will actually be the winners of each league against the runners-up of the opposite league. So like gold winner against blue runner-up. I don't particularly see why that is necessary. In fact, now that I say this, I don't understand why even doing these matches, these semifinal matches, is necessary, because isn't the point of the individual round-robin leagues to have a winner and have those winners fight each other? So why are you going to give the runners-up opportunities? My presumption is they're doing this because it's a math equation problem. So, for example, if you have two people with 12 points atop the gold league, but one of them has a tiebreaker over the other, then the person that loses the tiebreaker still has a chance to kind of get in the match. If not, if you have someone who has 12 points and then the second place is 9, that person should be eliminated, right? They did not win the league. So why are they getting another opportunity? I didn't really think of that when I was praising this a moment ago and putting this all together. So it's a little convoluted now that I think of it that way. We'll see how it plays out, though, because I'm going to give them a chance on this one because I do like more matches, and I do like more matches on pay-per-views leading to the end of a tournament. I'm sure one of the matches that will come out of all of this is Will Ospreay against Kyle Fletcher 2, and they'll set the third in Australia at Grand Slam. That's an early prediction. So we had the 3 matches on Dynamite. Mark Briscoe against Shelton Benjamin. Late in the match, Benjamin hit a thrust kick for a false finish with a great sell by Briscoe. He added an exploder power slam for the win. Recent ROH champion, taken down with relative ease in the first match of the tournament, not even mentioned by commentary. Fans only chanted for MVP after the match. He's by far the most over of the trio, which is because he's the only one who has said anything. I just didn't really have anything else on this, but Benjamin was the right winner. Ricochet against Claudio. We were told by commentary that Ricochet has major tournament experience because he won the Super Juniors a decade ago. Multiple times during the match, the crowd came up with pretty creative bald chants. The best was, "Bald, these guys are bald." That was the best one. Ricochet jumped onto and flipped off of Claudio's shoulders. Then he just stood outside, Claudio did, waiting for a tope. Claudio sunk in a sharpshooter, transitioning into a crossface, and then he hit a snug European uppercut. Ricochet countered Ricola Bomb into a pinning combination. Claudio then pulled the padding off the top of a barricade, dropped Ricochet crotch first into it. He was trying for a countout, made a nice thud. Back in the ring, Ricochet ate a lariat, a regular lariat, for the 1-2-3. So because his sack hurt, a mediocre lariat is enough for a 1-2-3 against a guy that went balls to the wall against Will Ospreay and Konosuke Takeshita and was supposed to be this crazy hype talent that just recently debuted. Don't get it twisted. Claudio had to win this particular match after beating Darby, and people need to lose in this tournament overall. Plus, I'm sure Ricochet will get plenty of wins in his league. I don't doubt any of that. But why the hell would you not have him take a finisher? Isn't the goal to keep him protected in defeat? Lariat and Ricola Bomb, while injured, is protecting him way better than just a lariat. This is how you beat someone who's leaving the company. I wouldn't even do that, actually, for someone who's leaving the company. Really odd creative decision here. Match was good. All of their matches, dating back even before WWE, have been good, and this was another one. I don't really have a grade. It would probably be around 3.5 stars. Darby fought Brody King. Brody did a cannonball into the barricade right as the picture-in-picture break ended. The camera briefly cut out, and when we got back to full screen, the commentary audio was completely out. So it was basically silent outside of the crowd, occasionally making noise for big spots. When the audio came back on, Darby hit an avalanche code red. He added a tope suicida and 2 ringside coffin drops, one standing, one on the ground. Except when he tried for a third inside, King caught him in a rear naked choke and hit his Gonzo Bomb finisher for the win. Great move at the end. King remains immensely underutilized, but he should shine in this tournament. We've obviously seen this match between them a ton, but it hits every single time. Claudio came in with a chair to threaten after the bell. Brody grabbed a chain to protect Darby. Again, people need to lose in this tournament. But beating Darby, fresh off of his loss to Claudio, just days after he stood up to the Death Riders at the end of a pay-per-view, that is absolutely nonsensical. And yes, the post-match segment happened. That still could have gone down if he won. How am I supposed to see Darby as this badass who's going to take down a gang of thugs invading the company when he can't even win regular wrestling matches against beatable guys who are bigger than him? And how convenient, by the way, that the Claudio Brody match is happening next week. Given the booking on Dynamite, it does seem like some of the bigger name groups might be stepping to the Riders. Given the attack of White, Bang Bang Gang could get run through them. Maybe that's the way Darby comes back into the picture on the back end. Perhaps he links up with House of Black and they create a foursome. That would be a pretty even 4-on-4. House of Black against Death Riders, and that would make for some excellent matches as well. The only issue is that House of Black really doesn't have a protecting the company from its oppressors vibe. You know what I mean? This all gets me thinking about Darby and Brody, though, as a tag team. That would be an awesome pairing. I know Brody is in Kings of the Black Throne with Malachi Black, but Brody and Darby as a team, big and small, the dichotomy between them, be pretty awesome, but I digress. On Dynamite, Don Callis with Kyle Fletcher backstage said they didn't just beat Ospreay, they decimated and skinned him. Fletcher reiterated that he's better than Ospreay in every way. He promised to prove his greatness further in the Continental Classic. Solid segment with both of them. Callis is extremely good on the mic. I'd get rid of what is now a fake scar on his head after he originally needed stitches all those months back. I guess he likes having a gimmick, so I'll let it go. Eldred Ryan at Acme Tunes wrote in, do you think that the Continental Classic should have bigger stakes? Last year, there was the novelty of being a Triple Crown championship. This year, you win a mid-card title that's defended all year around anyway. In kayfabe, why would a wrestler put themselves in a grueling round-robin tournament for a championship that they could just ask for a title shot for in any given week? The G1 is a guaranteed title shot and to headline New Japan's biggest show of the year. Same with the Royal Rumble. But the C2 is for the third most important men's title on a B pay-per-view. So, Eldred, you make a lot of salient points there. I disagree with one. The Continental has actually jumped the TNT title, so it's the second most important mid-card title, even though the way it's being booked and treated doesn't feel that way, but it technically is. You asked about the kayfabe reason for a wrestler to put themselves through this when they can just win the title at any juncture. The reason is simple in kayfabe. It's to win the title. That's what matters in wrestling, and you don't need much additional reasoning beyond that. Though you could get into the whole champions get higher paychecks and bonuses and benefits, and the earlier you win it, the better, all that type of stuff. The rest of your point stands, though, as neither the NJPW Strong nor ROH title are part of the tournament this year. So I guess the Continental Crown aspect of it is just over. The stakes do feel low, and the idea that a title holder can just lose his strap without being beaten directly for it is kind of frustrating. But then again, if you made this a huge round-robin tournament for a Continental #1 contendership, that would be even worse. So I'm not sure what the best solution really should be. It probably would be to do the Continental Classic as a #1 contendership for the AEW title. But again, even with that championship, people kind of just get shots and opportunities. So it's tough, but I would, if I had to choose, that's what I would do. I would make it into a G1, make it into a Royal Rumble equivalent, King of the Ring equivalent, actually, is really more what it would be, because now the King of the Ring does exist in WWE and does give the winner a #1 contendership for the title at SummerSlam. So I would make it a G1. I would make it a King of the Ring. I think they were onto something initially doing the Triple Crown. The way it was put together didn't work. And now taking away the Triple Crown aspect for it to make it a tournament for a title that regularly is utilized during the company also doesn't really fit. I said this at the beginning, right? The Continental Crown should probably be a crown or a trophy. And for the #1 contendership, that's what I thought it should have been at the very, very, very beginning when it was initially announced. Something different for AEW. But they have the Owen, right? Where they get title belts that don't get defended because they're not real titles, and cups as well for the Owen. So it's one company doing two somewhat similar tournaments. One's more of a tournament, one's more of a round robin. But nevertheless, it gets kind of mushed together. On Dynamite, Undisputed Kingdom came out with Roderick Strong missing. Adam Cole promised to beat MJF within an inch of his pathetic life after what he did to Strong. Kyle O'Reilly confronted, suggesting Cole do something different after they failed to take down MJF. He started cutting a promo wanting to fight MJF, but Cole cut him off, saying O'Reilly was right, and Cole cannot have his friends fighting his battles. They argued about it. MJF again appeared on the big screen from his fake home, this time playing a fake piano. Well, it's probably a real piano, but he was fake playing it. He said he has no interest in dealing with them because the Dynamite Dozen Battle Royal is next week, and then he played the piano. So Cole and O'Reilly entered the Battle Royal, and that was the end of the segment. For a storyline that has absolutely sucked since Cole returned, this might have been the highlight, simply from a logic standpoint. Sensible that O'Reilly wanted to fight to avenge Strong. Sensible that Cole took O'Reilly's advice, wanting to fight his own battles. The only weird part was the Dynamite Dozen. While that has historically been held the first week of December, except for last year, there was no indication at any point before the show that it was something on the horizon. The way you treat something as meaningless is to just throw it on a show with no warning. Like how WWE just threw the World Tag Team title match on Raw this past Monday night. No warning. At least for that, there were established contenders and a multi-week feud building to it. They had the match against the Seconds last week, won, so it would have made sense to do the title match this week, but they didn't promote it at all. So it's not even a fair comparison because at least there was storyline behind that. Here, they're just throwing it out. Hey, by the way, Dynamite Dozen thing happening next week. The ring matters and exists again. The MJF promo gimmick at home, it is totally tiring. And frankly, this entire feud, it just sucks. It sucks a big one. On a wider scale, it has no redeeming value. O'Reilly isn't adding anything into it. But like I said, at least this was sensible, setting up what should be an interesting dynamic in that match. Presumption is that neither guy ultimately wins. Perhaps O'Reilly sneaks it out. But if they're building to World's End and it's a tight build, then maybe it's Cole, and maybe the match with Cole and MJF is for the ring and their rivalry as opposed to just the rivalry. That's how he gets the match. But it would also be odd that MJF would have Strong and Cole jump through all those hoops. And now Cole can just blindly enter a battle royal, which I don't want to say it's easier to win, but it's not as hard, one would think, as beating 3 people in a row from an odds standpoint. I don't know. It's interesting how he was so concerned, O'Reilly was, about the Death Riders. Now he doesn't give a shit. And he didn't want anything to do with Adam Cole and Roderick Strong, but now he does because they're his friends. That part of it remains just odd. What's frustrating is that they did this segment immediately before announcing a mini 4-person International Women's Cup tournament. The winner gets a match at Wrestle Dynasty, the co-promoted show with New Japan, CMLL, etc. However, unlike the Continental Classic, where there was a long explainer on the screen, Excalibur sped through the rules during the entrances for the lone women's match on the show. Apparently, all 4 promotions involved in this Wrestle Dynasty, event, they're holding qualifying tournaments. And the winner of the 4-way match at Wrestle Dynasty, so 1 winner from each brand, can challenge for the title in any promotion of their choice. That's fine. It's kind of unique and interesting. It's a smart way to give matches meaning and create reason for the 4-way on that show. That is all immensely positive. The problem is that AEW just jammed this into an episode that contained the start of the Continental Classic and the random announcement of the Dynamite Dozen. So on one show, we learned about 3 contention series, and they weren't even spaced apart to let them breathe. It felt like when AEW would do special episodes of Dynamite after special episodes of Dynamite, it was like Fight for the Fall, and then Winter is Coming, then Fyter Fest, and it was like one after another. So none of them were actually special. Well, if everything on your show is a contendership for something else, it just gets convoluted and none of them individually feel special. But again, I like what they're doing with the International Women's Cup. I also think it's funny that the initials of that are IWC. So we had Jamie Hayter against Queen Aminata in the first of those matches. There was a great running basement shin kick by Aminata with Hayter's body hanging on the bottom rope. Very similar to Saray's awesome basement drop kick where she takes a person's head off. Queen needs to do that move more frequently. Maybe she has been. We stopped seeing her on AEW TV, so it's possible she's been doing it in Ring of Honor. They did some pin and submission counters with Jamie landing Haterade for the win. This just felt like a WWE speed match, not in that it was fast, but from the standpoint that Jamie was just going for covers after basic moves. She'd hit a clothesline, go for a cover. It was really weird. I'd have liked to see her win more substantially. It was clear when the 4-person bracket was announced that Hayter would be the winner. Willow is also in the bracket. I presume Marina will cost her in her match. The lights went out after this. There was a spotlight appearing on the stage, and no one came out. I know they were trying to do something with that. It was just kind of odd from a presentation standpoint. Obviously, the Julia Hart feud is ongoing. And now that I'm remembering that, I suppose it's possible that Hayter gets eliminated by a distraction from Hart, and then Nightingale wins. I'll stick with Jamie, but Willow is at least a possibility. On Dynamite, Mina Shirakawa, in an interview, said she knew the day would come that Mariah May would turn on her, given she already did it to Toni Storm. Mina called Mariah selfish and basically said she could turn up the heat too. May attacked from behind with a bottle and beat on her for about 10 seconds before saying, "I want Mina." Then she just kind of stood there staring at something, with the title match getting announced for 2 weeks at Winter is Coming. Fine segment. Like Mina, she speaks well for English not being her first language. Maybe Winter is Coming when Storm returns. Storm, Winter is Coming. That fits together. Also, AEW loves doing returns or debuts at that show, so that would make a lot of sense. On Dynamite, Mercedes Moné did an interview on stage with Camille. Tony Schiavone boasted about it being the longest women's match in AEW history. By the way, it was under 20 minutes. Now, I'm glad it was the longest match. It's not something you boast about when it's less than 20 minutes. He also said it's the women's match of the year. It most certainly was not. Mercedes gave Chris Statlander credit for the battle, saying that's how a real woman gets the job done. A real woman, unlike Camille. Monet began saying she was fired, like she was pretty much doing the Vince McMahon kind of gimmick. She was right in the middle of it when Camille cut her off, grabbed the mic, told her to shut up, and then quit. "You can't fire me. I quit." Then Mercedes freaked out for a moment, and the segment just cut off. This was truly horrendous. Not only is Camille now confirmed as the worst heavy in the history of professional wrestling, they didn't even give her agency to get ahead of the situation and quit. Right as Mercedes is bragging about herself, she grabs the mic. "I've had enough of this shit, Mercedes. I'm done. I quit." Throws the mic at her, storms off. Mercedes throws a fit. That's interesting. That's her having agency. Instead, it was, "Oh my God, I'm about to get fired. Okay, now I'll quit." It's a joke. So what happens now? They feud over the TBS title. We already know Monet's going to win that because Stat squashed Camille in 5 minutes and Mercedes just beat Stat. Or maybe Camille actually did hurt the shoulder that she's selling. She gets time off. She comes back in an unrelated storyline and we forget this happened. Or even worse, she gets time off and restarts a Monet storyline. I hope I'm proven wrong. I do not see how anything positive can come out of this. This was botched from the second Camille debuted, and it never got any better, including this split segment, which could have seen Camille either stand up for herself initially or attack Monet because she's been treated like shit and she's angry at her. It was awful. Now, I will say, when she quit and yelled at her, the crowd did pop for that, and that was positive. I was shocked that they actually popped because the whole of this has been terrible. But it doesn't change the booking. Just because they popped for it doesn't change the nonsensical booking and really everything that we've said about Camille as a heavy since she joined AEW.
I hate this. I hate this crap. Stop. Stop with the crap.
On Dynamite, the ROH title was on the line. Chris Jericho defending against Tomohiro Ishii. Learning Tree joined commentary. Jericho's mouth got busted open hard way. He had a Lion Salt, Judas Effect, and a Code Breaker. His 3 historic finishers, all in succession, for a 1 count. A 1 count. Ishii's nose got busted open hard way on one of those moves. Ishii then got 2.9 counts. 2.9 counts on a falling headbutt and a lariat. Jericho caught him running with a basement Judas Effect, adding a second to retain the title. Total age in this match was 102 years, and it showed. I'm glad this was not on Full Gear. It probably should have been saved for Collision. AEW continues to have a problem with its Dynamites after pay-per-views, though I will give credit to both guys for beating the ever-loving shit out of each other. Definitely strong style. That made it way more palatable than our typical match would have been, and I did ultimately enjoy it to a degree by the time it was over. On Rampage, Thunder Rosa was cutting a promo when a Caucasian woman in a hologram mask, calling herself Harley Graham, spoke not in a Mexican accent, but rather a combination of like a robotic and alien intonation. Obviously, it was Harley Cameron, which Thunder recognized first, not by the obvious entirety of her being, but by staring at, you guessed it, her chest. Oh, those must belong to Harley. Rosa talked shit, and Cameron kayfabe forgot she was doing a gimmick before leaving. Harley is unironically one of my favorite things in AEW right now. I was going to say my favorite thing, but one of my favorite things. It's kind of like when the Iconics and the Fashion Files were the best parts of WWE for that stretch. All legitimately funny, all deserve to be praised as part of the show. None of them should be the best part of the show, if that makes sense. So Harley, keep rocking it. She's legitimately funny. I'd love to see what she can do. I've almost given more to a degree, but now that I think about it, limiting her might actually be positive, right? Just to keep it in like a little bit of a silo on Rampage and on Collision. But I will say it's a Dynamite act, like in terms of it is deserving of being on the main show.
You rub me just right every week.
On Rampage, the conglomeration beat the Dark Order in 12 minutes. Why two sets of baby faces matched up when they were just recently fighting the Death Riders together? I could not tell you. And lastly, on Rampage, Juice Robinson beat the Butcher in 10 minutes. Why? For that, no reason. I guess he was too tired for this match to save Jay White on Dynamite. So folks, that wraps up AEW this week. You know, good amount happened on Dynamite. They are trying to do a quick build for World's End. How successful that's going to be remains to be seen, but the full concentration right now is on the Continental Classic. So with that said, let's wrap up this Thanksgiving edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. First, allow me to remind you about the schedule. We will be back on Saturday with your WWE Survivor Series War Games instant analysis. And if you have not already, make sure you listen to the ultimate preview for that show, which is in your podcast feed. Don't forget the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
It's all about the fight.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating. On Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast, and follow us on Blue Sky at Getting Over. The latter two for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can send in questions and comments for the show on both of those accounts, Twitter and Blue Sky. And on Twitter, you can vote in our pre- and post-show polls surrounding WWE Survivor Series War Games this coming weekend. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reaction audio to every major show, and exclusive news posts on Fridays. Again, buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Keep your eyes peeled for a Black Friday Cyber Monday special coming to a Buy Me a Coffee page near you. That's it for today. We will be back on Saturday with that WWE Survivor Series War Games instant analysis. At this point, it is time for the Silver King to sign off, enjoy some Thanksgiving food, and leave you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.